Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namini Namaste Sarasvati Devi Kauravani Prachari Nirveshisha Sunyavada Rakshatyam Vishatari.
It's a principle of love. The Lord is in our heart, in the heart of all living entities, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam, accompanying them and according to their surrender, Yatamam Prapadyante, so He protects them and allows them gradually to go back in His kingdom and attain liberation from this material world. If we look at this world, it's full of suffering. Even to breathe, it's difficult. Why? Because we are in a world where everything is opposite. Krishna explains the material world is the perverted reflection of the transcendental world. That's why we find everything here, but everything is unnatural. The Lord Brahma explains what we call happiness of the living being is suffering. We're attached to suffering. Our happiness is our suffering. Why? Because our attachments make us suffer. Our possessions make us suffer. Our goal make us suffer. What is the reason? It is that everything is far from our reality. Our truth is not outside of us, but inside of us. This is why the goal of yoga is that through meditation we can perceive who we are really. When we realize ourselves spiritually, so we become completely peaceful. We don't look anymore for what is outside, what is false, what doesn't look like us. We only travel inside. Through this inner vision, we can have a vision of the perfect world. When this vision is perfect, we can engage everything in this world without contaminating ourselves. So we need naturally this divine protection. And the Lord, as long as we are not qualified to have a direct connection with Him, so He sends us His representative to help us. This is why Rishabhadev, for example, the Lord Rishabhadev, he explains that we should not become a father, a teacher, a spiritual master if we cannot liberate people we give protection to. But the role of a spiritual master is to protect his disciple. It is the role of a spiritual master, because the disciple, in the perfect state of a disciple, he takes shelter to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Why do we speak about lotus? Often there's this notion of lotus. It is because the material world is considered to be an ocean of suffering. There are three kinds of suffering. The one caused by the living entities, mosquitoes, human beings. The one caused by time, rain, cold, hot, warm, heat, and also the one caused by ourselves, by the sickness with the body, transformation of the body that happens through the body. And these sufferings, according to Jaiva Dharma, they constantly work, and when they stop one time, we call it happiness. This is the only happiness this world offers. It's when there's a pause in these three kinds of suffering, but it comes back usually quickly.
si on observe
And if we see, if we look, if we observe just one day, we can see
c'est une réalité.
that this is a reality. And there are moments where suffering stops, and moments it's constant, and sometimes even in one day it's constant. And sometimes it's so difficult that we can even decide to die. Die seems to be more favorable than life itself. What is suicide? When you're in a house and the house gets on fire in a building, you're on the third floor, and when the building takes on fire, you suffer so much with the flames that you rather like jump out the window. You know you'll die. So suffering can be such in this world that the living entity can be pushed to suicide himself, because death seems like escaping suffering. It is more like favorable to die than to live. Can you imagine the level of suffering a person can experience? And why is she experiencing such level of suffering? It is because the material world is governed by laws. And these laws, they sanction the living entity, whether the living entity wants to assume himself on his own, take responsibility or not. I want to do whatever I want. I depend on no laws. I create my own laws. It's like that. But there are universal laws. We cannot cancel them. It's not possible. Even if we vote, even if we say today yes, we'll cancel them. We make a referendum, so it doesn't work. They are divine laws. They cannot be changed. That's why there exists some sacred texts that are manuals to escape somehow, to liberate ourselves from the cause and effects of our actions, or at least to accomplish good activities, to have a good future, we could say. That's what the religions do in general. They want to attain the paradise, to attain the heavenly planets. But when we act wrongly, for example, we'll cheat people. Everyone understands that we'll steal, we'll kill people, but also we'll accomplish things. We think that for us it's a good thing. For example, taking a little chicken, for us it's a good thing, but the living entity in himself, he has right for life. If you take life, then you have to take that suffering on your back. You understand? So even if we think that I never did wrong, we do things that are not considered to be good, even if we think that they're not negative things, because we're educated like that. But at some point, naturally, what happens is that life is a current of reactions of our actions. So sometimes we taste good fruits, we're happy, and sometimes the fruits are bitter because we take the reactions of our activities. And when there's too many sinful activities that are accomplished, at some point it becomes unbearable. It's like a constant pressure. You cannot escape. And at this point, the living entity is ready to suicide himself than to, to live in this situation. This is why by distributing knowledge, we can make people understand. Because when we give spiritual knowledge, to the living entity has the possibility to acquire goodness. And when a person is virtuous, when she suffers, what she thinks? Through the knowledge, she thinks, it is because of my previous activities. It's not that she wants to suicide herself. She surrenders. She takes shelter of the Lord. And from there, through suffering, she obtains liberation from suffering. Because this suffering pushes her to surrender and take shelter. You understand the principle? This is why the sages, the saints, they don't consider suffering like something negative. It is negative for someone who doesn't have spiritual consciousness. But as soon as someone acquires goodness, a virtuous intelligence, then he delivers himself. This is why suffering, it is obliged to exist in this world. It is perceived according to the three influences of the material energy that we receive: ignorance, passion, and goodness. In ignorance, we don't perceive much. We only receive the reactions. And we go to the animal state. In passion, we're looking for happiness, looking for position. And when we don't obtain it, it's a complete disaster. And in goodness, the suffering brings us back to our truth. So without knowing, we cannot discriminate and understand our environment and what happens with our own life. We will utilize things wrongly. We live only by a true instinct. What an animal does, he enjoys sex life, he eats, he sleeps, and the fourth, he defends himself. So, when we have these four capacities in us, we live by instinct. The Vedas explain that we're not more elevated than a sophisticated animal. But when we have consciousness of God, so we are a true human being. Because at the origin, the human being, all human beings have a spiritual consciousness. But if we accomplish too many activities that are degraded, gradually in ignorance will take us away so far from this divine consciousness, so we will live only through instinct. And many people in the age of Kali lived through instinct. Many people. So as soon as we stop living through instinct, we accept a spiritual discipline, because we need to understand who we are. We need to connect ourselves. We need truth. We need the truth. It's important. So, for this, we need to find a person that can teach us, because we always need someone who has the experience, a spiritual experience. The one who saw God, he can teach how to see God. This is the idea. If you didn't see God, how can you teach? It's theoretical. But theory doesn't allow us experience. It's the experience that brings to experience. That's what's very important. This is why the master must be a self-realized soul. Otherwise, he cannot teach. He will simply teach what is in like puja, worship, how to meditate, breathing. He can teach rules, but he is not himself on a liberated platform where he can experience his truth. So once we take shelter of such a master, automatically we take shelter through his lotus feet. So go back to what I was saying, to the ocean of suffering, is that although he pushes in the ocean, he is not touched by the water, although he swims. You can understand the allegory? So, when we take shelter of a pure devotee, although he is situated in the material world, since he is the representative of the Supreme Lord, when we take shelter at his feet, automatically we become ourselves protected, because we are not considered in the ocean anymore, in the water. But all these shelters you can obtain through the instructions. When we receive the instruction of a pure devotee, this instruction is not different from the relationship he has with God, or his experience of God. It emanates naturally from the highest truth. But when we respect this instruction and we follow it with devotion, then we obtain all the fruits of the spiritual master, and we can be introduced in the eternal reality. This is why the great saints, like Prabhupada, explained that the pride of a disciple is the instructions of his guru all his life. He wants to fulfill it. And because of this, he becomes completely liberated and realized. So spiritual life is not complicated, but it's not so simple. Because in us, there are desires. Although we receive Bhakti Lata Beach, the seed of the plant of devotion, it is explained that when we receive the initiation of a spiritual master, authentic, realized, he plants, through the grace of Guru and Krishna, he plants in the heart the seed of the devotional tree. And it is just like, this seed is just like faith. Faith will allow us to take shelter of a pure devotee, to practice and purify ourselves from all undesirable things in our heart, to attain fixation, to develop the real taste for spiritual life, attachment, the beginning of love of God, and prema, love of God. So, this plant, she grows up. At the beginning, when the disciple is neophyte, so we need to start somewhere. When there's no experience of love of God, we can perceive there are other plants who grow in the heart. For example, the plant for being in a good position to enjoy in this world. And it looks like it's difficult for the neophyte to distinguish what is the good plant and what is the wrong plant, because it doesn't have purity. So he will mix somehow. It means that his devotion will be mixed. And this mixed devotion does not allow to have the full shelter. She doesn't allow to attain the goal of existence. Why? Because we can attain spiritual realization. We can attain Krishna only through pure devotion. Because God, the Lord, He reciprocates with the living entity. And if the living entity doesn't have the necessary purity, so He doesn't give Himself. He will fulfill His desires, but He will not give Himself. This is why, although all of them follow a same path, each and every one has different realizations according to his heart. And it's normal. But it's not that someone is put aside. Someone is excluded. We see some religious people, they're really hard. You go to hell for eternity. It's not so inspiring. But it's not like this exactly it happens. Already the soul is eternal. And the relationship she has with the Absolute Truth is eternal. It is simply momentary. What's happening in our conditioned state. This is because we desire to have this experience. And it's given to us. But once we're tired of this experience, so the truth comes to take us, to bring us back in this higher state of happiness and of bliss. So, although we can be wrong sometimes, and even sometimes in life we can go off the path, when we touch the spirituality and we touch devotion in another life, so we are brought again to walk back on the path. That's what Bhagavad Gita explains. Arjuna says, when the living entity is lost, and if he abandons the path, isn't he like a cloud that moves in the sky? And it seems like it disappears. Krishna says no. Everything he accomplished in his previous life, he can obtain to get birth again on the heavenly planets. And when certain fruits consumed, he comes back again on the earth, and he comes back just like a devotee. Nothing is lost. Nothing is lost. This is why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, after lives, a person can truly attain me. But why? It's because time doesn't have an existence. Time is an illusion, Kala. Time. It is an illusion. Although it looks real, it never touches the soul. When the soul becomes realized, that's almost like she has never been in this material world. This is why, although we speak about thousands of lives, billions of lives, as soon as the living entity attains perfection, that will be like is always increasing. Even at the beginning of devotional service, when we start to be initiated and we start to be sincere, we feel that all the connections we had in this world, they disappear. Like when you're coming out of a dream. You go, it is an extraordinary experience. I remember when I practiced again in this life devotion, the thing that it did to me is that all the connections I had in this world, it was like I never had them before. It was like it was not touching me anymore. And I was feeling all my connection with my previous life. And everything I'd done in between, it was like it disappeared completely. Like I was coming out of a dream. It's incredible, it's mystical. This is why, although we can keep links in this world, we have the truth. And these connections cannot contaminate us because we realize through devotion that it is temporary. It's false. Do you remember your previous lives? Where are they? So this life, it's the same thing. We must utilize the environment of living entities to deliver ourselves, not to chain. You understand? This is why we must become souls, self-realizers. Spiritual friendship is very important. For example, we can have a family life in spirituality, but when we have a family life, we engage ourselves to deliver ourselves. This is why the acharyas, the spiritual preceptors, they say that the true family life is an engagement to attain perfection and not to get more attached and more illusioned. I am a woman, I am a man. I love you, me too, I love you. I love you, I love you. We all have known this. Look at ourselves in the eyes without speaking for hours. We call that the illusion. It's a big illusion. And the more it is strong, generally it finishes bad. So the point is not to start the same mistakes again. It's to learn. Life must be a way to learn. We must learn from insects. We must learn from the wind, from the living entities. We must learn constantly. When we are connected with the Lord and the heart, Paramatma, we learn. We observe and we learn. This is why it's really important when we live in community, when we live in a couple, to help each other, to reach, to go beyond all these illusions. It's very important. And for this, we need a spiritual practice. Strong, not small. Because the illusion is powerful. It is just like a tree in the stone. No matter what happens, we don't deviate. There's no special appointment, this, that. It's tree in the stone. That's why it is recommended to wake up early, because certain hours are more favorable for meditation. And also people sleep. So, at least we're not disturbed. This is why we must learn to go to bed early and wake up early. We must regulate our life. This regulation, this sadhana, this spiritual practice is essential for our development of consciousness. It's very important. So the man and woman or the community should be a dynamism that pushes us to go towards this reflection. And that's something that could bring us down. Like, for example, we can imagine a life of a couple where the man wants to practice and the woman says, but then you let me go, you abandon me, and this and that. It's impossible. It's impossible to progress like that. So then, if the man is really attached to liberate himself, the other will leave the other one, will divorce, because this is search for the soul is what is most important. So you cannot continue with that person anymore. So we must truly be friends and understand to be true spiritual friends. We must understand the nature of the soul. And the Bhagavad Gita explains really well the nature of the soul. When we understand that we're different from the body, then we can practice spiritual life. That's where it starts. This is why in the discipline of our life, in family life, for example, it's really rigid. Don't think that we're just brahmacharis. That means people who practice being celibate just because we're celibate. No. True spiritual life, even in a couple, there's no sex life, just to have children. Because sex life identifies the being with the body. The goal of spiritual life is to enter in ourselves and realize we are the soul, and this connection with the Supreme Lord. When this is established, sex life is very small. It's insignificant, and it is explained. It is like a perversion of love. We call that kama. This perversion is the origin itself of frustration, of spiritual frustration. This is why, although at the beginning it is difficult, because the senses are very strong. It explains the senses are like snakes. When they wake up, they bite you, and then it takes you. It's very difficult to control the senses. But with spiritual practice, gradually, the senses, they become less and less powerful. It's like the snake was finished and there was no more venom, poison. They don't have the power to captivate you. And from there, it's possible to be a friend, because we will help each other. This is why, for example, the woman and the man, woman is considered like fire and the man like butter. If the woman is not chaste, it's not possible for the man to be chaste. It's not possible. But if the woman is chaste, she's considered like a fortress, and men can take shelter of the woman and be peaceful. Why do you think there's not much spiritual life? Why is there a lot of people who have a material life? It's because when there's no chastity, the man and the woman, they cannot have a spiritual life, because they're just taken by this form of illusion. So when they are taken by this illusion, there's money, she's beautiful, and this and that. To attract, it's just a competition. Everyone is there, whoa. But spiritual life, where is it? There's no more spiritual life. This is the problem. This is why in Vedic society, the women were educated to be chaste, because they are, how to say, the mean to find balance in society. As soon as a woman has qualities, wow, I saw a chaste woman. I remember once I was in India, there was a really chaste woman. It shocked me. It's very powerful, a chaste woman. In the West, in India, in holy places, you have women that are very chaste. It's so powerful that it controls you. You cannot have wrong thoughts. You think it's my mother. It's very powerful. That's why we consider a mother to be like a Mataji, a mother. Because on the origin, the women were they protect the men. It's very interesting. And once the man is protected, so he can have a lot of strength from that, a lot of strength. And the woman, then she takes shelter of the man also for this strength. So it's completely, we say men and woman are two halves, and then it's perfect. Of course, we're not obliged to get married. We can also be celibate and take sannyas, but it is still something more rare. There are these two natures that exist, but we say 95% of the people or 98% of the people, they want to get married and have a family life. This is why family life also, there are rules, there's a way of practicing it to attain success. And this we must learn from the spiritual master. In fact, in Vedic society, we were speaking about the instructions that the spiritual master gave. Even in family life, there are instructions, and from these instructions, the disciple, whether he is married or not, they all attain perfection. There's no superiority. It is simply with the consciousness by which we do things. You can be a brahmachari and not attain success, or you can be married and attain success. For example, one day, Yamunacharya had a disciple who was a king, very, very rich, and a queen. And he told another disciple, he said, go, infiltrate yourself in the room and go get jewels they have on them, ornaments. So he said, wow, it's a big wealth. And so they went to see the very dear disciple of the Guru come, and and he started to take the earrings, the bracelet. Even the lady, she shown that she was sleeping, but she was not, and she just moved away so she could take more of her ornaments. And then he left. And Yamunacharya, he said, so there were a lot of sannyasis. Sannyasis are really renounced. They have a few pieces of cloth, a piece of cloth like a robe, like a dress, one for the underwear, like 4 pieces of cloth. And he was drying their cloth on ropes. Yamunacharya said, now you mix all these cloth. And then there was a big conflict for the pieces of cloth. Because he says, no, it's mine, this is not yours. And then the finality of the story is that it's not poverty that makes us detached. It's the consciousness by which we see things. Everything comes from the Supreme Lord. Everything is done by Him and for Him. So everything is an energy of the Supreme Lord. So if we use something, even wealth, and we know it's not belong to us and God, then we become liberated from attachment and impurities. And even though we can have a sannyasi, have 4 pieces of cloth, and be illusioned by a piece of cloth, thinking, I am a sannyasi, I am a great preacher, you understand? So, we must truly understand that when we have a house, we should never consider this our home, because nothing belongs to us. This body doesn't belong to us. We should simply establish in our home a temple. We should establish a spiritual world. If we live in the spiritual world, then naturally, gradually, the spiritual consciousness will evolve. Thank you very much.